From all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the southern United States. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Folks, we got a great show for you today. Really excited. We're going to be talking to Dr. Augustus Wood about his new book, Class Warfare in Black Atlanta. We're going to be talking to you about the Huntsville Hospital merger here in just a second. And then in the second half of the program, we're going to be talking to Matt Bruenig about the latest news with the NLRB and his response to an anti-union Twitter guy. Going to be a lot of fun, folks. So let's start with Huntsville Hospital, where we broadcast out of Huntsville. Y'all know that. Huntsville natives. And Huntsville Hospital is seeking to acquire Crestwood, their only competitor within 50 miles, I think is what I saw on the news. And, you know, within 50 miles, that might even be like conservative, because I'm not sure who their competitor is 50 miles away from here. But there has been a real, like, shocking amount of pushback from the community. Anytime something is said about it in Reddit or on a local news Facebook page, it gets literally hundreds of concerned comments, like oppositional comments. People are not happy about this, and there is just no effort by the hospital to, in good faith, address the concerns of the community. And so I want to play for you a recent news report to kind of outline again some of these concerns for you that we have been talking about here on the Valley Labor Report, because this brave nurse from Crestwood was willing to put her name and face on the news. And by the way, just in case we've got some private investigator from Huntsville Hospital listening to our program right now, it is illegal. It will be illegal to fire this person when you take over Crestwood. She works for Crestwood. She's a nurse for Crestwood, and she went on the news to talk about her concerns about what this would do. It would be illegal to fire her because she is talking about her working conditions, talking about her concerns about her employer, and firing somebody for talking about that publicly is a violation of Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act. So, just so that you know that, you should not try to do anything to this woman. But she outlined some of these concerns, and so I just want to reshare them with you from her own personal experience, and then I'm going to give you a little bit more data that we haven't shared before on the program, and then we're going to give you what Huntsville Hospital, how they're reacting, and how non-responsive it is. Let's play clip 1.
As soon as I started interviewing and talking, I realized 25% cut in pay. And that was moving from
Okay, so pause it there for just a second. This woman, like I said, she's a nurse. She works at Crestwood now. She came from the Auburn-Opelika region. She is talking not about coming from big fancy New York or big fancy California, where everybody's in a nurses union and everybody's got a good union contract with high wages and a pension and everything like that. She's talking about, I worked for 20 years in Auburn-Opelika, and to work at Huntsville Hospital, I would have had to take a 25% pay cut. To go from being a nurse in Auburn-Opelika to being a nurse in Huntsville, Alabama, the biggest city in the state. That is shameful. Let's continue.
Montgomery. I mean, I had over, like 20 years of experience.
Seeking better pay, she moved from Huntsville Hospital to Crestwood. It's that choice she had that she says nurses and doctors need.
That was, very important, that I could go somewhere else. And at this point, if this happens, where do you go?
The Huntsville Hospital system currently owns 12 hospitals in the North Alabama region. With the acquisition of Crestwood Medical Center, all general hospitals within a 50-mile radius will be owned by Huntsville Hospital. The Federal Trade Commission has challenged similar deals like this in the past. In 2023, nonprofit Novant Health announced a deal to buy 2 North Carolina hospitals. It was for $140 million less than the Huntsville Hospital deal. The FTC sued, saying it would reduce competition in the area. Novant eventually backed out while the case was tied up in the court system. When I specifically asked a Huntsville Hospital spokesperson about the possibility of a monopoly, it wasn't addressed directly, but I was told, quote, "Our goal is to provide better coordinated care for our community and to enhance the workforce development and training programs for our staff."
So there you go. Doesn't address the concern about monopoly directly and just kind of obliquely talk about their good intentions. I mean, that's the whole response from Huntsville Hospital to this whole thing. And, you know, she talked about the wages and working conditions, and there have been multiple studies about how these sorts of consolidation tend to decrease wages for people in the healthcare professionals in the region. And so Huntsville Hospital knows this is a concern with respect to their acquisition. Here's what they're saying with respect to the wage concern. I kid you not, like, this is what I got from somebody who is basically amounting to a Huntsville Hospital spokesperson. Quote, "Nothing changes today for Crestwood. Employees remain in their current roles under existing compensation, benefits, and HR policies." You know, it's like, I asked the person who sent this to me in an email, like, do you think that's responsive to the wage concern? Like, I'm coming to you with concerns about what might happen in the future once Huntsville Hospital takes over Crestwood to the wages and working conditions of healthcare professionals all across Huntsville, but specifically at Crestwood. I'm concerned about what might happen in the future, and you come to me and you say, nothing changes today. Well, obviously nothing changes today because Huntsville Hospital doesn't own Crestwood today. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Nothing changes. Obviously nothing changes today. What are you like, that's crazy. Are you stupid, or do you think I'm stupid? Because it's got to be one of the, or you're just a liar, right? I mean, yeah, nothing changes today. I mean, I was flabbergasted, flummoxed when I read that in an email. Like, what do you mean nothing changes today? As if that's my concern. It's insane. Okay, so that's what Huntsville Hospital is telling people. Nothing changes today for Crestwood wages and wages and benefits and stuff. Okay. We've established that's ridiculous. What about the concern with respect to the prices? Okay, so in January of 2025, the Department of Health and Human Services released a report about horizontal hospital-to-hospital merges in concentrated markets. All right, so horizontal meaning, a firm is taking over another firm, a competitive firm, whereas like vertical integration would be, taking over a specific like physician office. Right, so this is horizontal. What's going on here? Huntsville Hospital taking over Crestwood, horizontal hospital-to-hospital merger. They found that those raised prices in the area anywhere from 6% to 65%. I mean, that is a huge, huge difference. Or that's a huge. I mean, that's a big spectrum, but none of it's good, right? I mean, if it raises prices by 6% higher than it would otherwise be, that's like really concerning. And this is from an issue policy brief put together by the Bipartisan Policy Center. Okay, so not people that we would normally be like, oh, these are great, Bipartisan Policy Center. The issue brief is titled Healthcare Provider Compensation. All right, so, if you want to read a little bit more about consolidation, you should read that. It's interesting. So there's a trend here, and they're not the only, the Huntsville or the Department of Health and Human Services report from January 2025 is not the only thing that has shown that these sort of mergers increase costs, right? But it is one of them. And so I've got this general concern, and I have also been pointing out how New Orleans specifically has seen this play out in their market. And so I got a response saying that what the New Orleans situation is not relevant because, and look, I want to share this with you because, it's worth knowing. It's a factoid that's worth knowing. From 2022 to 2025, Huntsville Hospital Health's statewide market share increased by 7%, while its average charge to cost ratio declined by 5.7%. This period of growth was marked by lower relative charges, demonstrating a commitment to operational efficiency, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I have a couple of, just with the relevancy of that statistic, the statewide market share is nothing that anybody ever is that concerned with, right? I mean, the statewide market share is not the thing that's going to impact the prices. It's going to be the regional market share.
Right. You're not really competing with Mobile.
Right. Exactly. But it's worth knowing that over the last 3 years, their average charge to cost ratio declined by 5.7%. Like, that is interesting to me, but it is still non-responsive to my concern about the fact that if they take over Crestwood, they will have a 100% market share in Huntsville and be able to have no restrictions on their ability to raise costs, right? I mean, this is what happens with monopolies. Monopolies do not typically become monopolies by charging higher prices than everybody else, right? They become monopolies by, at the beginning, offering high quality goods and services for lower prices, and then they become dominant in the market, and they take advantage of their dominant position in the market to raise prices, decrease quality, and lower and decrease and degrade working conditions, right? That's why, it like, how do people think that organizations become monopolies? It's because they start by offering a good, right? A good thing. And then from their position of market dominance, they take advantage of the power that they have acquired, right? So it's totally non-responsive to my concern about the power that they will have with a monopoly. There's nothing stopping them once they get 100% market share from raising the prices. And so it's just not responsive. And so that is what Huntsville Hospital is saying. And if you want to see this full WAFF piece that we clipped from where the nurse was talking, you can look it up online. The title is "Where Do You Go? Healthcare Workers Voice Concern Over Huntsville Hospital's $450 million deal." The piece is by Nick Ballinger. Really, really good, like, real reporting in that piece, and there was some more that I didn't include in this segment because I want to push you there because it was a really good piece, and I appreciate Nick's work on that. And so I just want to wrap this segment by pointing people in directions that can lead to actually changing the situation. If you are concerned about this, there are a few different avenues that you can go. You could reach out to Huntsville Hospital's board directly and tell them that you are concerned about this and you don't like this, and you don't like how, frankly, little respect is being given to the community with respect to our concerns about their attempt to have a monopoly over healthcare in our region. And we would like to see some real answers. We would like to see them answer questions publicly and in good faith. And actually, we would like to see them make commitments. Put it in a contract saying we're not going to decrease wages. We are not going to degrade working conditions. We're not going to, degrade care standards. And we're gonna have these specific, and just saying that I'm not going to degrade standards of care, that sentence would be meaningless, right? Unless there are specific, measurable, and objective standards. Like, that's what I want to see. Is I want to see them saying we will not allow the nurse to patient ratio to fall below what it is now. And that number, the number that it is now is whatever, 1 to 8 or whatever. It's not going to fall below 1 to 8. We will not allow the charge to cost ratio to increase at all over the next 10 to 20 years or whatever. We will, it needs to be specific, measurable, and objective. Otherwise, it's meaningless and it's just like PR stuff. So you can reach out to them directly. You can also file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, which, as Nick Ballinger noted, the FTC has in recent years tried to stop hospital mergers. And you can also reach out to the city council, your city councilor in Huntsville. And now this despite my city councilor, David Little, I reached out to him with some of my concerns about this, and he said that city council has no authority over Huntsville Hospital. And I think that this, much like Huntsville Hospital's response to community concerns, this really strains credulity to me, because the city council appoints the board that governs Huntsville Hospital. So it would be like me saying, what would it be? It would be like an employer hiring somebody and then going on to say, I have no authority over them. It was like, you hired them. Like that's, it's almost difficult to conceive of how much more authority you could have over an institution than appointing the people that run it. Yeah, right? And so I think that if the people on the board of the Huntsville Health Authority, or whatever it's called, the organization that runs Huntsville Hospital, I think that if the people on the board heard clear communications from the Huntsville City Council that they will be removed from their position in the most extreme case if they allow this to go through, or if they allow this to go through without strong commitments to the community, or in the more in the like lesser case that they would not get the job again if they allowed this to go through without commitments to the community, then I think that would change their behavior. And so,
You'd think.
So I'm very disappointed with his response to me saying that, I've got no authority. Why even be a politician if you do not want to exercise the authority that you have and you want to pretend that you have no authority? Like, I have never understood that sort of dynamic, when people are like, people in positions of authority, there's nothing I can do.
I ran into that so much at the school board level because every time I would talk to a school board member, they would say, oh, well, that's the superintendent. That's not me. But you hire the superintendent. You sign his contract. You are his boss. Like, okay. I mean, it is a very frustrating thing. And there was one board member in particular I remember thinking, like, why in the hell did you even run for this office? Like, what was the point of it if you literally cannot do anything besides just sit up there every 2 weeks? And what's the point? Right,
exactly. And in the most, like, in the lowest case, that's not the word, but in the least case, okay, maybe even let's grant he does have literally there's literally nothing that he can do, through his votes on the city council or whatever, to influence Huntsville Hospital. I mean, you could come out publicly and say, I have the same concerns about this merger as my community, and I agree with them that Huntsville Hospital should make commitments to the community. Yeah, I mean, like, as opposed to just waving it off and saying, oh, well, it's not, I mean, you're a leader in Huntsville. You have some level of a bully pulpit, right? I mean, if you came out tomorrow with a press release saying, this merger is concerning to me for this, that, and the third reason, that would increase the public pressure, outside of any statutory or legal authority, that would increase the public pressure on Huntsville Hospital to respond, and to respond in good faith, to respond in a way that treats us as if we are adults rather than, children and people who don't understand anything. It's just, and if you do not have concerns, then you should stand 10 toes down and tell me, I do not have concerns. I think it's a good thing, rather than this whole like, I don't have any authority. I don't really have a position on it. I'm just a little small bean. I don't really know what I think about. If you support it, then tell me you support it. Don't be, Don't be just a small boy.
That's right. Stand behind it.
Exactly.
If that's what you're about, be about it.
And I also want to, as I wrap this up, it's not like there is no reason to support it, right? I mean, there are economies of scale, and
theoretically, this could work out.
It could work out, right?
It could.
There are economies of scale, and if you have an efficient system that is actually run in the interest of the people of Huntsville, this could work out well, right? And maybe all of the people on the board do have these good intentions, and it's all going to work out, and that's fine. And so make the case that you think it will work out, why you think it will work out, and why you don't think that despite all of these commitments that you're getting from people that are saying it's going to work out, why do you not think they should have to make strong, ironclad commitments in writing in a contract? That just make the case you trust these people enough that they do not need any more constraints on them to behave well. You know, I mean, just stand behind your. I hate the like just the mealy mouthed and the like not taking a position and not being willing to stand behind what your actions will lead to.
Yeah. Just
know?
be upfront. Like, if you're against me, just be upfront against me.
Exactly.
That's fine. We'll deal with it.
Exactly. You know, I mean, it's like this is like a totally different thing, but the dynamic is very similar. It's like the people who vote third party, and then when they get criticized for voting third party, because of the outcome that some people would say it led to, they're like, oh, well, no, it wasn't us. Well, it's like, it's true that it wasn't you, but that is like the outcome that you were pushing towards, right? I mean, if you as a third party voter like are fine with that, in a swing state in particular, then you should make the case that that's like the good thing to do. Where, and we can have, there is a different conversation about whether it makes sense for people to actually come out and criticize it, and the dynamic is not like that powerful. But, for the people that are advocating that you do that, you should make the case, right? Stand behind it.
Yeah, just stand behind the consequences of what you're supporting, I think, and be clear about that.
Yeah.
It's not a lot to ask.
It's not. It's not.
And I did want to lift up a comment we had in the chat, which is reminding folks that the Huntsville City Council will have 3 seats up for election in August. Mm-hmm. Same with the school board. So, those are nonpartisan races. They take place in August, so, a little bit before the general election in November. Typically pretty low turnout on these elections. So it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, the local business establishment is very powerful and influential in local elections, but there's a lot of opportunity for grassroots people power to flip some of those seats when it's necessary and appropriate. So, hope folks will keep that in mind.
Bill Kling, David Little, Jenny Robinson. Jenny Robinson is District 3. Bill Kling is District 4. David Little is District 2. They're all up for election.
That's right.
Okay. We went a little bit long on that, but there's some legislative stuff. Adam was in Montgomery. Talk to us about what's going on down there.
Yeah, I went down to Montgomery this week on Tuesday. It was a really busy day. There were lots of folks down there. I was there in solidarity with the Immigration Advocacy Coalition, or Immigration Rights Coalition. It was the Advocacy Day they were hosting, and want to give them kudos. All the people who put in a lot of hard work and effort to pull that off. I know it's a lot of work, but there were, it was a good crowd of folks there in solidarity with the immigrant community. The Reproductive Justice Coalition was also there, so there was a lot of people power in the State House. There was also a lot of lobbying power in the State House. Tuesday was the committee hearing on the Public Service Commission bill, and I don't know how much we've talked about this on the show, but there is an effort that you've probably heard about by now to take the public out of the Public Service Commission. So it is currently an elected position. We, the voters, elect the members of the Public Service Commission, and that's who regulates all the utilities. And so there's a move to try to make that an appointed board by the governor and legislature. And there was some bipartisan support for it. just to be very clear, there has always been bipartisan support for things of that nature. And I remember that the legislature tried to do something very similar a couple years ago with the State Board of Education, right? They wanted to do a similar thing where the State Board of Education would be appointed. They would take away the public's right to vote for this office. And they were soundly rejected by the voters. And everyone I've talked to on this issue feels likewise, regardless of their politics or, background or affiliations. Almost everyone I've talked to thinks it's pretty silly to try to take away the public's right to vote on this. Now, in reality, the Public Service Commission in Alabama is widely known to be a pretty captured institution. It is very heavily influenced by the companies it's supposed to be regulating. And those companies have a lot of political influence and spend a lot of money on political operations. So they carry a lot of weight. But the Public Service Commission, I don't see how insulating it even further from public accountability and public input is going to be a positive thing. And it met with a lot of pushback this week. There's been a ton of pushback from constituents across the state. The committee hearing got real dicey. The folks who were speaking in opposition were grilled by some of the legislators on the committee. And that seems to be a trend this year. More and more of that's happening where, constituents and advocates go to speak to these committee hearings in the legislature, and all of a sudden they're the ones who are like on trial. And they're the ones being grilled by lawmakers when they were just there to make their 2 or 3 minute comment. So that's been an interesting trend. But as support has waned, it seems like this bill, or, there's a House and a Senate version. It seems like it's, run into some roadblocks. Some folks have already announced they're not going to be supporting it any longer. There was some attempts to amend the bill to placate some members of the Democratic caucus, and that was rejected by members of the Republican caucus. So we'll see if anything really comes of it. And the other thing I wanted to mention real quick is that there are a lot of issues being discussed around criminal justice reform. There are some good bills being proposed. I want to give credit to Representative Christopher England from the Tuscaloosa area for always pushing on that. The Alabama Solution documentary is nominated for an Oscar. It's in the news. A lot of people are paying attention to Alabama's broken criminal justice system and system of mass incarceration. Unfortunately, not enough lawmakers in Montgomery are paying attention to it and trying to do the right thing. As I was there Tuesday, in large part because there's more efforts to target immigrants and those communities. Some really stupid stuff talking about, you have to be a natural born citizen to run for office in Alabama. There's also an effort to make driver's license exams English only, which, what do you do if you're from Puerto Rico? You're an American citizen, right? There's so many different problems with some of these bills, and basically they're just mean-spirited. They have no research or evidence to back any of this stuff that it's going to actually be beneficial to anybody or protect anybody. But a lot of mean-spirited bills, but interesting to see some people power this week push back in a few different areas. So we'll see what happens. We'll have to stay tuned. The legislature is going to be rocking and rolling for another month or two. So definitely pay attention and make sure you're talking to your lawmakers.
It was interesting seeing the pushback against the pushback on the Public Service Commission. I was really frustrated with the refusal to actually engage with what was being said. I mean, much like the Huntsville Hospital stuff. I mean, the critics of the critics were just like, they were not making the case that the public should not have the right to vote for the Public Service Commission.
Well, my state representative, Danny Crawford, told me not to worry my little head about it because we're in the TVA region, but also that this is going to help businesses and farmers somehow. Right. I don't know how that's going to work, but he blamed it on woke dark money in Georgia. Turns out that's what's triggered all this. Reformers won some seats on the Public Service Commission in Georgia, and now they're all fired up about it.
Yeah. Crazy. Crazy stuff. We're going to go ahead and open the phone lines. We'll take some calls on the other side of the break. Would love to hear from you. 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. We will be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Today on the program, we just talked about some Alabama stuff. Huntsville Hospital acquisition, the legislative session. If you missed that, you can find it on Facebook and YouTube. Search the Valley Labor Report and go back and watch the beginning of the stream. We're about to have a conversation with Dr. Augustus Wood about his new book, Class Warfare in Black Atlanta. Really excited for that conversation. All that and more on today's show. If you'd like to call in, folks, the line is open right now. 844-899-TVLR. 844-899-8857. We'd love to hear from you. You can leave us a voicemail at any time if we're not live. And you can leave us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. That is tvlr.fm/contact. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find anything you find anything on. You can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or just make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, you should get your local, district council, or international to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey y'all, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, WMSP, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out at laborradionetwork.org. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're really hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So thanks for tuning in today. Whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
We're not going to be getting to Last Week in Southern Labor today because the NLRB website is down, and also I did not have enough time to prep the rest of the segment. It will go out as a newsletter, so subscribe to that, and you'll get it on Monday or Tuesday, tvlr.fm. And so we will take a call. This caller, let's go ahead and bring them on the air from a 256 area code. Believe I know who this is, and maybe even what you're calling about. I've got something to talk about with the prisons line up, so you may be calling about that. Dwayne, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you guys doing? Good to hear you on the radio and everything. Well, I do want to tell you that Stacey George is down there with a bill that he's drafted. It's really good. It's a bully with a badge that would take care of the corrections officers and police officers that have a history of violence. You know, other persons don't want to work in corrections because they have to look the other way or report someone that did violence, like in the Alabama solution. And you remember how terrible that was when you watched it, Jacob. And so that's a really good bill. It has everything that you would do about it and how to take care of it. And he's shopping it to both Democrats and Republicans, and he'll be there doing that this next week. And as far as the Public Service Commission, guys, that has a lot to do with the AI warehouses, like Meta and Google wanting to come to the state to use our resources. And if every so many years they have to deal with the person that's over the PSC that changes their mind or might want to be for the people, they can't make their profits like they want to. They want it to go to the state to make a long-term contract that's handled on that level. You get what I'm telling you there, right?
Yeah, I think these data centers are definitely a big factor in what's going on here.
Yep.
I
think that some of the bills in this package of legislation are not actually bad. I mean, I think that there was one bill that would require that data centers pay 100% for all of the infrastructure improvements that their development requires, or something like that. I mean, there's some pieces.
Right. There's a mix. Yeah. Some of the legislation seems more positive.
But the whole thing about making the not
appointed,
elected any longer public service commission, that's very terrible.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Handing that over to the state is just really a travesty there. But I do want to tell you, I'm real big on quantum physics, and there's a reason for that. It's in my early upbringing and things, because I knew a professor that was he's very high in that whole area. I believe that the energy that's needed to run AI centers will be significantly cut down within probably 4 or 5 years. So everything that's happening right now that's going to need that energy won't need it then, if you follow me, which will still mean that they bought land and did things. And I really think they should let that electricity be used in a cheap way for the persons around them. But those are the things I wanted to touch on. I can't wait to hear whatever you were going to say about the prison system, Jacob.
Yeah, Dwayne, I appreciate the call. Thank you so much. So what I wanted to share with folks... Yep, you too. What I wanted to share with folks, and I am kind of surprised that I have not seen this anywhere else at all. I mean, literally no news stories about it. You Google it, and there's nothing. There's no local news. There's no national news. Except for stuff that was covering it when it was announced back in December. But supposedly, strikers or prisoners in Alabama are on strike again, and it started almost a week ago. They had announced that they would begin striking. They had announced back in December that they would begin striking on February the 8th. So that date has come and gone. And labor reporter Kim Kelly has a flyer out, or has a tweet out about it, saying, "Support the strikers. The Free Alabama movement has announced a work strike set to begin on Sunday, February 8th. Incarcerated people across Alabama are answering the call and refusing to participate in their exploitation and oppression. This nonviolent action comes in response to decades of unconstitutional sentencing practices, forced prison labor, and the ongoing humanitarian crisis throughout Alabama's prison system," Free Alabama movement leaders said in a statement. Read the list of demands below, scan the QR code to take action, and stand in solidarity with the strikers of the Free Alabama movement. Their demands are, one, to repeal Alabama's Habitual Felony Offender Act, to make the presumptive sentencing guidelines retroactive, to make there was some sort of statute reform for drive-by shooting that was apparently already enacted. They want to make that retroactive. They want to have first-time offender reform bill. They want to have a parole board reform, medical furlough and compassionate release expansion, a statewide conviction review unit, abolish forced prison labor, and Strengthening Families Act, like strengthening family visits and stuff. So, all seem like, at least at first blush, pretty reasonable demands, especially considering what they have been put through. If you go and watch the Alabama Solution, I do wonder if maybe there's not any reporting about it because the crackdown on the strikers on the prisoners has been so severe in the wake of the documentary going public. There was a report out of the Associated Press back at the beginning of February, talking about how the family members of some of the key leaders in the documentary say that they fear for their loved ones' safety. They have been moved to solitary confinement as retaliation for their outspokenness about problems within the prison system. Robert Earl Counsel, Melvin Ray, and Raul Poole were transferred 2 weeks ago from their existing prisons to solitary confinement at Kilby Correctional Facility outside Montgomery, Alabama. Their lawyers said the transfers come as some groups have encouraged a new prison labor strike this year. This is straight up retaliation. And, I mean, it seems like it. And just think about that action happening, that these people are being punished with solitary confinement, a form of torture, because they are sharing with people outside of the prisons what is going on in the... I mean, there is zero allegation even that any of their claims were false or fabricated or anything like that. Just that they were sharing what's going on in Alabama's prisons with the outside world, and that has gotten them retaliated against. And, potentially fearing for their safety. I mean, there was a guy who, one of the key kind of narrative lines through the documentary was about this case of an inmate being beaten to death by the guards and his cellmate wanting to speak about it because he saw it, but then being killed himself before he was able to get out. I mean, it's,
And this is with our tax dollars.
Yeah.
And it really, really is disgusting. And I just want to send our best to all those folks who are participating in nonviolent action. And, really, really hoping there is no further retaliation. And I think it's incumbent upon the lawmakers in Montgomery. They are in session, now. Like, they can do stuff about it. They really can. And so really, really appreciate the folks who are continuing to spread the word about the injustices in this mass incarceration system here in Alabama.
We've got Dr. Augustus Wood on the line. He is an assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and the author of the new book, Class Warfare in Black Atlanta. Dr. Wood, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thank you so much for having me. Very, very big fan. Very honored and excited for all the work that you all are doing and glad to be a part of it.
Well, we really appreciate your support and really looking forward to talking to you about this book. Adam, go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. And I figured before we talk about the book, which has come highly recommended by a lot of our historian friends we've had on the show before, some of whom I know, but if you could just talk a little bit about your story and why you've been so interested and devoted to the cause of labor, because I know labor is a big part of your life, and I'm just curious. We always like to hear those stories. What got you into this?
Well, I grew up in a very I want to say volatile, but very strong household that always was adamant about the dignity of human beings. My father came from a sharecropping family in Cordele, Georgia. His father built houses, did all these other things, and then he comes to Atlanta. He works for the city of Atlanta, and he was somebody that always was adamant about the power of people and working together. And so that was something that was instilled in me at a very young age. And some of my other family members were disciplined, fired, or just outright objectified in the 1977 sanitation strike in Atlanta. That's detailed in the book. So I come from, that was my origin story. And then then just throughout the years, I've always been part of just looking at labor as being a source of power for people. My first job was washing dishes at Folks Restaurant in Atlanta. Those that are familiar with know which restaurant I'm talking about. And we got in trouble for talking up about the discrepancy of pay between black workers and undocumented workers. American workers and undocumented workers. And so that was my first kind of foray into my own personal organizing, and then doing stuff when I was a teacher in Atlanta as well. And from that point on, it's just been kind of a trajectory where I became the president of my union, GEO 6300, at the University of Illinois as a graduate student. And we went on strike in 2018, 14 days, and we won all these other things. And since then, I've just been kind of a resource for labor, because I do truly believe that the power of withholding labor, the general strike, is the means to which we will transform the system. And there's a lot more we'll talk about with that, but it's always been a part of my core being is to champion working class people.
Amen, brother. Yeah, I really appreciated you sharing that. And let's talk a little bit about the book, Class Warfare in Black Atlanta. Was there something that really sparked this project for you? What motivated you to write this book? What were you trying to answer for folks?
Well, again, as somebody who grew up in a city that kept telling people like myself to stop complaining, at least it's a black city, you get kind of tired of that after the first decade or so, when people are just living in abject poverty, when the system berates you and tells you that, well, you're poor because it's your own choice, because we give you opportunities in the quote unquote black Mecca. But the erasure of class, like the local political figures and state political figures homogenizing the black experience, scholarship coming out that doesn't address class as a position of the political economy, non-materialist studies. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that sparked this in me, but I think the major thing I wanted to do is that because the conditions of this colonial situation are so bad that people are looking for the most genuine depiction, particularly understanding the fact that we as working class people, a lot of what is happening to us, even especially today, is a reaction by the ruling class, because we have organized, we have built resistance, we have built alternative institutions. All these things have occurred. And so my purpose in terms of this book is twofold. It's a functional critique of the political economy of urban spaces, particularly Atlanta, so that we can develop stronger intervention strategies for envisioning a future of liberation. And the other reason is that I wanted it to be a champion of to champion the black working class as being the heart of the struggle against capitalism. It's something that Marx said, it's something that Du Bois said, and it's something that others like Sundiata Chajua has said, Lou Turner, Claudia Jones, all these other really great figures have said this. And I wanted it to be in a contemporary context to showcase that, yeah, the black worker is responsible, just like the end of industrial capital, that the end of agricultural capitalism, slavery, that the black worker is responsible for destroying and forcing a reaction by the ruling class, and to do it in a setting like Atlanta, which is championed as the freest place ever, where everybody can have opportunity. I think is the best way for people to see it. And yeah, it's about that.
Absolutely. Well, I really, really appreciate that. And, I can tell it's certainly a passion project. And anytime you're getting into the roots of your own city, it touches close to the heart, I think. And so I'm curious, what are some of the key takeaways you had in writing this, and what are some of the key lessons that you hope readers are going to take away from it?
Awesome. So the first big one is that to understand Atlanta and to understand urban space, how it transforms, the theories around revitalization, gentrification, financialization of capital, to understand space from an urban context, we have to consider the internal neo-colonial thesis that a population of people, predominantly dark-skinned people, are oppressed by the ruling class and have to pluck members from the oppressed class to operate as indirect rulers or the junior partners of capitalism, so that it decreases the amount of the purpose is to decrease the amount of resistance from the oppressed against the colonial project. And that was how that was how the ruling class, in not just in the United States but globally, responded to the working class revolutions of the 60s and 70s that were sought to critique the point of production, use those resources from labor strikes and other parts of the point of production, and to build power in communities through social movement capacity. So that's really the first thing, is that to understand how cities became cities and urban spaces, both regional and cities, they can only transform by understanding the internal neocolonial thesis, which means that class has to be a central point of analysis, and historical materialism is the best methodology for understanding our history, as well as the study of the oppression of the Black working class and working classes in general, because now the white working class is experiencing forms of neo-colonialism as well. It's not the same as the Black working class, but they're getting elements of it now. So to understand what the current federal regime is doing, you have to study the conditions of the Black worker. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that gentrification is often thought of as a housing crisis, but in fact, it is a labor crisis first. So the book details how labor was the critical point of working class power for African Americans in Atlanta, how we used it to try to fight for the right to the city, because our argument is that we should have the city. We live here. This is our land, our property. Because we live here, we deserve human rights. We deserve to have ownership of our conditions. And the labor was also the point at which the Black petty bourgeoisie, the Black urban regime, operating as the junior partners of the Chamber of Commerce and all the corporate executives for Atlanta, they dismantled the labor base in the city first, which starts gentrification. So you can't talk about gentrification without the labor part, especially. And the third part, which of course I always say for last because it's the most important, is that the Black worker, the Black working class, ignited the shift from industrial capitalism as the main mode of production, all to financialization of capitalism. That the strikes, the community organizing, the fight for the city, the Black Power movement, revolutionary nationalism, radical socialism in the Black working class community force the leaders of urban spaces to step back and say, if we're going to accumulate profit the way we want to, we're going to have to repress the working class agency to fight for their spaces. And so it wasn't that capital was just so brilliant and decided to financialize and globalize. No, it was a reaction to the uprisings of insurgent community rebellion across the globe, typically by darker skinned people. So those are the three major points that I wanted folks to get across, and I was using sources from the voices of the people themselves, which is the micro level of study. So
yeah, and there's a lot you said there that resonates with me. I mean, there's a few things that stood out. You referenced the sanitation workers strike in '77. And we had a very significant sanitation workers strike in '71 here in Huntsville, Alabama, that a couple of us are looking into and doing some study of. And so this is right on time for that. But also, I'm reminded of how in Alabama politically we have a lot of folks in the minority caucus, Black elected officials who are very much friendly with the Business Council of Alabama, the Chamber of Commerce, all those sorts of institutions, and seeing how even just, we were talking earlier on the show about this big fight in Alabama around the Public Service Commission, and there are some officials who are, more or less on the side of Alabama Power Company and Southern Company, and it cuts across race and party line as well. And so I think, the emphasis on having a real materialist analysis and understanding how class really plays out and understanding the importance especially in Atlanta, of the black working class. I just really appreciate that about your work. And I'm curious, as you wrote this, as you did this research, as you've been really thinking and wrestling with these questions for a long time, was there anything that you had to rethink or something that surprised you? Was there anything that, just kind of shook you up a little bit as you did this research and did this writing?
Well, to be honest with you, a lot shook me up about it. The thing about it is that even though I participate in many labor struggles in my past and currently, you don't really understand until you talk to the people, particularly from the past, the tenacity and hatred for working people that comes across in this work. I was really surprised by, because you always talk about, the class is a position of interest. And so decisions are made in the interest of capital by the local administrations, the black petty bourgeoisie, the black urban regime. But some of the things that happen that just show a complete dehumanization of the black worker is incredible. The first one being, of course, the Atlanta child murders, which until my book hasn't really been thoroughly investigated from a working class perspective. You had the documentary that came out, and then you also had the I forgot the name of this show, Mindhunter, that explored it, but neither show did it from the perspective of the black working class. So when I actually got into the documents from the STOP organization, the black mothers who were fighting to keep their jobs while also trying to protect their children from being murdered, the callousness of the black urban regime trying to pass off these murders as black mothers being lazy, calling their children sex workers, saying that their community is so unorganized that they can't even keep up with their own children. So it was a dehumanization propaganda machine against black working class women who were simply trying to build protection for their community. It's those kinds of things that really surprise me. The intensity of the dehumanization of black workers. I didn't grasp that as much as I should have at the beginning, but the more I read through and talked to people, I think that was the key thing for me. Same thing with the labor thing. When the sanitation workers were fired in 1977 by Mayor Maynard Jackson, he sent them empty job applications in the mail to fill out, taunting them that, you could come back to work maybe if I let you, that kind of stuff. I mean, Andrew Young defending police officers murdering black children. I mean, that's what I'm saying, is that at a certain point, the class and I talk about this in the introduction, that class has a fluidity to it depending on the intensity of the project. And this is a colonial project, and it wavers here or there in terms of how much profit you want to accumulate. And you could tell at certain points, because Andrew Young is so much more nastier in his love of the privatization of the city, that a lot of his projects are going to be even more widening of the class dynamics. So that was probably the biggest surprise for me, is that it helped me grasp the tenacity of dehumanization in a colonial project that I should have understood before. But that's why it's important to do a project like this from the perspective of the oppressed themselves.
Right. And, what I'm thinking of right now, besides all the connections I'm making to Alabama as well, what are some of these connections and lessons for us today? And you've touched on it a little bit in terms of the struggle that we're facing right now in this country and certainly across the South. For labor activists and working class folks who are listening, what are some of those lessons for us today that we can take with us in the attempt to try to build the kind of diverse people power we really need to make things better?
Yeah, exactly. That's the best way to say it. I think that the most important thing is to understand that our current condition right now, as working class people, and overwhelmingly the black working class, is that we're in I call a sub-proletarian position, that we constitute a sub-proletariat now, meaning that the capital has reshaped the economy to the point, as a reaction to our demands for not just survival resources, but resources to build social movements. They have rearranged us as a sub-proletariat, meaning they have put us in spaces that dehumanize our lives labor wise. They put us in places where where most of the jobs are low wage, no benefits, non-union, and unstable in terms of time, keeping a daily routine, etc. So that's all by design. And so warehouse work, we're talking about sweeping streets, we're talking about home healthcare aid, we're talking about fast food. These are jobs that they make unstable for a reason. Right. And just like in Alabama, how they're hiring the incarcerated to work in fast food and stealing their wages. I mean, that's sub-proletarian labor, right? So we have that aspect of it. Housing for sub-proletarianization. Again, gentrification, like the housing that's available becoming even more unaffordable, to the point to where people now are living in extended stays. So much now that extended stay motels have become one of the largest construction projects in the United States today, because people just can't afford houses and people don't have the credit to get apartments. So you have families being raised and communities being built in extended stay motels. Proletarian labor. Again, colonial project to dehumanize our livelihood. We're also talking about social humiliation, that there's no public transportation in many of these places. They're suburban and they're in the outskirts of cities where we're being resettled. So you have to have mass transportation. That doesn't exist. Many people don't own cars. Close to half of the country doesn't actually have access to a car, despite what they tell you on television. And so these things are there. There's no entertainment that's built to sustain people. Recreational centers are not built. They're building prisons in those areas as well. So this is what I call sub-proletarianization, that our first position post-Great Migration was proletarianization, where we went and sought jobs to improve our condition as Black people away from the agrarian situation, where we could finally get wages in the factory. They put us at the bottom of the factory, but we still got wages. So it was a proletarianization first and foremost. Now, because of our increased community activism, etc., now we're being proletarianized. And we need to understand that when we talk about the conditions of workers in general, but predominantly Black and brown workers right now. The ICE detention centers, those are concentration camps, labor camps, where private companies are making tons of money. So again, that it's the concepts and the theoretical frameworks that we have to apply to the current problem if we're going to think through how to organize in a much more critical way than we have in the past, because we have a relatively different configuration through a sub-proletarianization process by capital to take away resources, jobs, housing, social life, all the things we need to build community and build movement capacity. They're taking those resources away so that we have harder time to organize against them.
Brother, there's a lot that you've said today that is going to stick with me. I'm really thinking, about this last 50-ish years of neoliberalism and the way it has been such a reaction to the progress that was made in the 20th century. Those waves of people power that we had to win all these rights that we love to celebrate today, that are, of course, being unraveled before our eyes. But But I know we're coming up on time. So, Dr. Wood, was there anything else you wanted to leave us with today? Really enjoyed the conversation, but yeah, I want to give you some last words.
Yes, I just want to thank you all. I want to thank the Valley Labor Report because, again, emphasizing the necessity for alternative media is one of the core foundations of building a vision for liberation. Again, this is Marx, this is Gramsci, this is the absurdist. The idea that we have to not just build alternative media, alternative cultural productive products that we must embrace to knock down the dominant narrative, but we must center those in our core, because that is how we're going to transform society, is by creating our own spaces and institutions. And I think Valley Labor Report, as well as other alternative media sources, are those spaces. So we have to continue to support and build power for people through these means. So I'm so honored and appreciative of being a part of this process with you all.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, really appreciate it, and we'll definitely be staying in touch. Thanks, brother.
Please do. Thank you.
We're going to take a break. We will be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us today. We're coming up on the end of the first half of the show, but you can listen to a whole second hour and a half of the show if you find us online, Facebook and YouTube at The Valley Labor Report. We got a great show lined up for you. We're going to be talking to Matt Bruenig about a Twitter conversation that he had been having with some like conservative anti-union guy. We're also going to be talking about the Tyson's plant that's closing in Lexington, Nebraska, killing over 3,000 jobs in a town of 10,000. We've got some more updates on that. We've got some updates on the Ford guy, the Ford UAW guy who yelled at President Trump. We've got an update for you, and we're not going to tell you what the update is until the second half of the show. So you gotta find us on YouTube and Facebook, The Valley Labor Report, to hear what happened to that fellow who told the President of the United States what's what. Really exciting story. So find us Facebook, YouTube, The Valley Labor Report, and continue watching. But we got another 15 minutes here for you before we go off of the radio. Katie Britt is the senator for Alabama, one of the senators for Alabama in the U.S. Senate. And there is a law that says that that lawmakers, their spouses, and their dependent children must disclose trades no later than 45 days after the transaction to help prevent insider trading by members of Congress. It is known as the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act, or the STOCK Act. It was passed in 2012, and I mean, it's such a it is so insufficient. Adam, why don't you guess what the penalty is? What the potential penalty is? I don't even know that it's automatically applied. But what is the potential penalty for individuals who fail to report trades worth more than $1,000 within the required time frame?
Well, I mean, potential penalty. Maybe they fine them, like some fine, a sliding scale based upon their violation.
Yeah,
maybe.
And it's worth taking into account that the salary of a U.S. senator is, what is it, $170,000, a little bit more
it's
than
six
that.
Figures, but it's not a millionaire.
But the net worth of senators are a lot of money, so you would think that it would need to be like a reasonable amount of money to kind of deter.
Yeah,
folks.
It'd have to be a pretty nice fine, you'd think.
Yeah. You would think it would have to be like at least more than a speeding ticket, right?
Oh, heck yeah, of course. Yeah.
When you get speeding tickets, how much are they?
It's like, what, a few $100s, right? Typically?
I think the last speeding ticket that I got was like $300, which that sounds excessive to me. But what do I know? Here's what the potential penalty is. I don't even think that it's automatically applied. But the potential penalty is a whopping $200.
Wow.
Yeah.
Less than the cost of doing business, huh?
That's for sure. That's for sure. So you got to disclose trades over $1,000 within 45 days. You, your dependent spouse, or your spouse, and your dependent children. And Katie Britt violated the STOCK Act, and she disclosed those violations in a January financial report. And she was asked about her violation of the STOCK Act by a reporter with Dropsite News. And so we've got that video of him asking Katie Britt about that violation. His name is Julian Andrione. Let's play this clip.
Can you tell me a little bit about what went into the calculus of trading J.P. Morgan stock while sitting on the banking committee?
Oh yeah, let's pause for just a second if we can. To let you know, she is on like the banking committee in the Senate, and so it's doubly weird for her to be buying stocks of J.P. Morgan as a member of the banking committee. That's weird. So that's the stock that she traded and did not disclose in violation of the Stock Act.
Can you tell me a little bit about what went into the calculus of trading J.P. Morgan stock while sitting on the banking committee?
I have not traded any stock.
Oh, that's not true. It's in your disclosures, ma'am.
No, I have not traded any stock.
Ma'am, it's in your office's disclosures, J.P. Morgan stock.
No, I think you should actually go check.
Okay, we'll put it up on the video.
Yeah, and then also anything else that we've done, we also made sure that any proceeds from anything always went to charity.
Your office disclosed it.
Okay, so,
well, I didn't do it, but if I did do it, it was for charity.
It was for the children.
It was for the children, the babies, the sweet, precious babies.
Man.
Don't you know it? I wasn't corrupt, but if I was, it was for a good reason.
Yeah, look, maybe I'm being too charitable, but it was, it's not like it was millions of dollars. It was a trade less than $15,000. And I think that...
okay, I hear what you're saying.
Right.
But look,
but
a
also,
trade that's less than $15,000... How many of us out here in the working class can do
our entire
a
savings
trade
is
of $15,000, right?
Exactly.
Most of us don't even have that, anywhere close to that.
Mm-hmm.
So... yes, relatively so, minor, but compared to, I don't know, the constituents, kind of a big deal.
Yeah, well, that was one of the trades. There were 22 trades that were violative of the Stock Act. All of them were between $1,000 and $15,000. But they were not disclosed on time. But only one of them was J.P. Morgan. So the J.P. Morgan one was less than $15,000. And also, she says it was stock holding in her husband's broker-managed retirement account. So it was not directly, so I don't know why she answered in it. Like, the situation itself,
may not be
I can buy that. The retirement account that was being managed not by him, there was just a mistake and stuff got lost in the I can buy that. It's just like, why would you answer it like that? Like, why would you just say, the only thing that I can think of is that maybe, she said, I didn't do it. And so she's, not lying because it was her husband's account, but she knows what the guy is referencing. So why would you do an outright denial? Yeah, why would you put an outright denial and then, why wouldn't you say, oh, you're asking about this trade that was made by my husband's broker managed account that was not me directly, but I still recognize that we violated the law, and we apologize for that. And she said in a statement that, just to forestall any appearance of, impropriety, she did say that she donated, any of the proceeds, like any, delta, positive gains that they made from those trades to charity. And so, whatever, fine. But that was weird and funny, and so I wanted to share it with you.
Yeah. I mean, seems to me her response is a little more fishy than whatever it was she was being asked about in the first place, frankly. So that is a little weird.
It is a little weird. And also, the Alabama Daily News notes that Alabama is home to one of Congress's most prolific stock traders, Senator Tommy Tuberville, who has a total trade volume of $38 million. $38 million, and who has opposed banning stock trading by members of Congress, because if he was not able to trade stocks while he's in Congress, he might be disincentivized to be in Congress, because a measly nearly $200,000 a year salary is not enough for him to get up out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. Even though the dude made millions of dollars as a football coach, in some cases being paid not to coach. Yeah. Wild.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, and
then
he
wants to be the next governor of Alabama, everybody.
He wants to be the next governor of Alabama, and he wants to call people like us, union activists, who are fighting for, 10, 15, 20% raises over a period of years on a total base salary of somewhere between like $50,000 and $100,000. He has the nerve to call us lazy, even as $200,000 is not enough for him to get out of bed in the morning. He's got to be able to make money on his money, on top of the tens of millions of dollars that he already. I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's crazy.
The old football coach.
Yeah. Okay. We like to try to get to Boss Watch every week, and there was a lot of harassment cases in the last couple of weeks. We're going to start in Louisiana, where Minden Seafood and Dorchett Seafood are going to pay a former employee $34,000 in back pay and emotional distress damages to settle a sexual harassment lawsuit filed by the EEOC. According to the lawsuit, a male cook at Minden Seafood repeatedly sexually harassed a female cashier by making unwanted and inappropriate sexually suggestive comments to her, propositioning to her, and following her into the women's bathroom where he exposed himself to her, and she reported the cook's behavior to a manager and requested working hours to avoid being with him. But the manager took no steps to protect her from this conduct, and so she felt forced to resign. She was denied also employment at the sister restaurant, according to the lawsuit. And so, that obviously violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, and so that's why she's getting that $34,000 settlement. Under the 4-year consent decree settling the lawsuit, the companies will compensate the former employee, and they will also conduct training, revise policies, and provide regular reports to the EEOC and post a notice affirming their obligations under Title VII. Moving to Oklahoma, Archfellow North, a owner and operator of 8 McDonald's restaurants in eastern Oklahoma, they're going to pay $80,000 and provide other relief to settle a sexual harassment lawsuit and constructive discharge lawsuit brought by the EEOC. According to that lawsuit, an adult male supervisor sexually harassed a teenage worker for a whole month in November of 2021. And that November of 2021, I want to flag this for you. That illustrates how broken our system is, how underfunded the EEOC is, how few resources they have, that they are, in the year of our Lord 2026, finally completing a sexual harassment of a teenager lawsuit from half a decade ago. And the Trump administration wants to cut the EEOC's budget. I mean, just actually absolutely terrible. An adult male supervisor sexually harassed the teenage worker for about a month in November of 2021. When Archfellow North learned about the supervisor's sexual harassment, it failed to properly investigate the allegations and allowed the supervisor to continue supervising the teenage victim and other young workers. As a result, the teenage victim had to quit. That violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And so as a result of the consent decree, they will pay $80,000 in monetary relief and will designate personnel to ensure its compliance with Title VII. They're going to enact strong policies and procedures for reporting and handling sexual harassment complaints and provide for mandatory training for supervisors and non-supervisory employees. The consent decree also requires Archfellow North to post a notice to employees about their federal right to be free from sexual harassment in the workplace, provide for multiple avenues for employees to complain about sexual harassment, and report to the EEOC reports of alleged sexual harassment. And, this is people, I always talk, when I see one of these cases, which is not irregularly, I always think about how restaurants and retail and the service sector is seen as a normal job for a child to have, and it is seen as, just a chill thing that people don't deserve to be paid good money for. Despite that conception, retail service sector, particularly restaurants, have the highest rate of sexual harassment of any industry in the country. There is no other industry where you are more likely to be sexually harassed on the job than if you work for a restaurant. So, people deserve to make money, and that's, one more reason for it. The fact that it is such a dangerous job with respect to, the personnel dynamics. I mean, people really have their head in the sand about stuff like this. That's going to be it for us on the radio today. Like I said, we've got a whole second half of the program lined up for you. We're going to be talking to Matt Bruenig about an anti-union Twitter stuff. We're going to be talking about the UAW Ford worker who told Trump what's what, and more. So find us on Facebook and YouTube, The Valley Labor Report, to continue watching us. If you don't do that, though, we appreciate you. We appreciate your time on the radio. We appreciate you listening to us, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. All right. We're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. We got a great second half of the program lined up for you. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report. We are the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to give us a call, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail at any time throughout the week if you're not catching this live, and you can send us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. We've already got our Zoom guest, our guest in the Zoom, so we'll go ahead and bring him on. Matt Bruenig is a labor lawyer and the proprietor of NLRB Edge, a Substack newsletter website about the latest happenings at the NLRB. So really excited to talk to him about the latest happenings on of the NLRB and on Twitter. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Really excited to have you on and appreciate you taking the time. I wanted to start with this SpaceX case because, there's a fellow that worked at the ULA here in Decatur for a long time that sent it to us with, some concern that could have some level of relevance for the people at United Launch Alliance and other, aerospace manufacturers. So can you explain the SpaceX case before we talk about the ramifications? Can you give us kind of the narrative, like what was and the facts of what was going on with SpaceX at the NLRB?
Yeah, well, a lot was going on, actually. There were, I don't even know how many, dozen or more cases maybe of different unfair labor practices that they were engaged in. The particular case that you're referencing, there were 8 engineers who, if I recall correctly, they'd criticized management in some way, which is protected activity under the NLRA. They were fired. They filed unfair labor practices with the board, trying to get reinstated. And as one of their defenses, SpaceX says, we are not subject to the NLRA. Instead, we are covered by the Railway Labor Act. And so if we're covered by the Railway Labor Act, we shouldn't be doing this stuff at the NLRB. There's a whole other process and statute for that. And that went on for a while, and recently, was it this month or I don't remember exactly what it was, but the board has kind of given up and taken the position that, yes, we agree that SpaceX is covered by the Railway Labor Act, not the National Labor Relations Act.
What's the argument that they're covered by? I mean, so for people who don't know, labor law in this country is so fissured and inconsistent. There's all sorts of different laws that cover different sorts of people. The modal labor law that most people are going to be on in the private sector is the National Labor Relations Act. But there was a labor relations law that passed before that, the Railway Labor Act, which was meant to, but because some of the first big strikes in the country were of railroad workers, and so there was an interest from Congress in managing labor relations on the rails specifically, and since then, airline workers have been governed by the Railway Labor Act, and it's because of it's something to do with the nature of the work being interstate and having to do with transportation. What is it exactly that makes somebody covered by the Railway Labor Act versus the National Labor Relations Act?
Yeah, I'm not an RLA expert, so I don't know if there was an amendment in the statute or if the initial language of it was vague enough that it would include railroads, airliners. But the language that you get, like I said, I don't know if this comes from the statute or case law or whatever, is common carriers. So any kind of common carrier, whether by land or by air, that's moving people, they consider that to be governed by the RLA. So from there, you can see SpaceX says, well, just in the same way that airlines move people, or common carriers, our spaceships do the same thing, and so they're covered by the RLA. I don't know how far you would go with that. It seems like SpaceX basically moves satellites. It doesn't really move people. It's not like transportation. Like people use SpaceX to get from one place to another, like on the Earth. But that's the idea is we're just like an airline if you kind of squint and look at it the right way.
And when the NLRB, I don't know if this is the term of art, but disclaimed interest in having authority over SpaceX. Did they give any of original NLRB reasoning for why they agree, or did they just say, they're right?
I wish I had went into this a little bit more. If I recall, what happened here was they were in a circuit court proceeding, and so they're fighting it out with SpaceX there. And rather than continue that and say we're going to keep seeing if we can get the judge to agree with us and that it falls under our jurisdiction, they withdrew and gave up essentially. So that was like the mechanism of disclaiming jurisdiction, not a published board decision in the ordinary sense.
Okay. And so, before we talk about the ramifications for other unionized or for unionized aerospace workers, just to address the elephant in the room, I can't see a world in which this is which there is no motivation by the fact that Elon Musk is such a close political ally to the president. Am I totally off base there? Is there, do you think the general counsel of the NLRB is kind of being, rightly motivated, or do you think there's something to the fact that Elon Musk is a political ally to the president, and there's just no way that we're going to be able to succeed against him because of that?
Yeah, actually, I should have, the what actually happened here, it's sort of the order of events was the National Mediation Board, which is now another thing, right? We got the RLA, the NLRA, the NMB. The National Mediation Board is an entity that resolves these jurisdictional questions. So you can kind of go to it and say, hey, we think we're under the RLA. Or vice versa. We think we're under the NLRA, and they will issue a decision. And so that's what happened, is the National Mediation Board said, we think it's the RLA, and the board has a policy of deferring to, whatever the NMB says. So the question just becomes, why did the NMB say this? And I think your point is probably the correct one. Whoever is staffing the NMB, put in place by Trump, SpaceX wants to be under the RLA, we'll give our opinion that it's under the RLA. At that point, the NLRB is, their hands are tied. So, I guess I wouldn't put it on the general counsel of the NLRB. I think, the real action was happening at the National Mediation Board.
I see. Okay. That makes sense. And so then for already unionized aerospace workers, ULA, I think, being kind of one of the premier ones, but also Boeing to a certain extent. I guess maybe Boeing is obviously a bigger company, and so I don't know what how their aerospace department compares to the United Launch Alliance, but there are a lot of already unionized aerospace workers. What does this mean for them?
Yeah, so under current law, as long as you are not yourself, like the firm that you're at, the company you're at is not itself engaged in, usually this comes up in the airline context, in like flying planes, you usually don't get covered by the RLA. So there used to be a two-part test at the RLA, or the NMB, applying the RLA, that said you would be covered by the RLA if the work you did was traditionally performed by carrier employees and your employer was directly or indirectly owned or controlled by a common carrier. So basically, either you work directly for the airline, to use that example, or you work for like a contracted firm that does work that would traditionally be done by the airline, or that is controlled by the airline in some way through contracts, whatever, right? And so the place that this would typically come up would be airport workers, right? If I'm an airport worker, but I don't work for Delta or for American, but I just work at some company that maybe cleans the airports or cleans some of the planes or stuff like that. But it's a different firm, and our firm doesn't fly airplanes. Historically, those firms would often get sucked up into the RLA. But a few years ago, there was a case called Swissport where they simplified all that and said, we're getting rid of all that. If you're not a common carrier, then your employees are covered by the NLRA. And so this, again, mostly applied to these contractors and subcontractors at airports. But if that is continuing to be the rule, then it would seem like there's not too much of a concern for something like Boeing or any of these aerospace workers. As long as they aren't running airlines or launching spaceships themselves, those companies should still be under the NLRA.
I mean, I think ULA they launch their own space stuff.
I don't even know what the ULA is. So
oh, okay. Well, maybe
yeah.
maybe I only conceive of the ULA as like such an important player here because of the proximity geographically to it. But United Launch Alliance does a lot of they build a lot of rockets and they shoot them up into space. They build them like here in Decatur, Alabama, and in California, and then they launch them in Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Yeah.
So
well, then, yeah, if they're launching them inside the firm and not building them for some other firm, the way Boeing builds airplanes for American Airlines or whatever, then yeah, I think that the SpaceX reasoning would apply.
So is there precedent for workers who were previously governed by the NLRA to like shift jurisdiction, as in, you know, because they are already unionized and they're already under the NLRA and they have already got a contract and they've been working under this system for literally 20 years at the ULA. Do they, you know, is there a kind of a grandfather clause that says like, okay, guys, you know, I mean, maybe you're rightly under the RLA, but you've been, you know, I mean, you're here. So, you know, kind of like you're just staying here.
No, that's
a
great question. What happens, because this happens sometimes in other contexts where, like, you've seen this with charter schools, actually, because they kind of skirt the line sometimes between public and private, and the law could change in a way that will all of a sudden make them private or make them public in the way that is relevant to labor law. And so they'll switch, you know, from Louisiana state public sector law to the NLRA or vice versa. I don't know the answer though to the question. Unfortunately, I'm sure it's out there, but that's too niche for me at this point.
Well, I'm sure the machinists are going to be looking into it, and we'll be keeping an eye on this because I mean, very, very concerning for them. I know the machinists are the ones that represent folks at the United Launch Alliance. So we got another case at the NLRB that I wanted to talk to you about, and that's actually what kicked off the argument that you had with Richard Hanania. But before we do that, we got a question in the chat that I think I don't think that I agree with it. But the question is, isn't the real purpose of these labor laws to labor boards to just prevent wildcat strikes, like historically? I think my answer would be no, not really. I mean, that's probably part of it, but I don't think that was kind of the driving thrust of it. But you know, I mean, Matt, you are a lawyer for the NLRB, so what's your take on the historic purpose of these boards?
There's a great book on this. What is it called? Like the State and Labor or something like that goes over this. And as you might expect, you know, the sort of like historian's answer to this is like it's very complicated and nuanced, you know, like
right.
To some extent, like the state is a place of contestation between labor and management, you know, so sometimes labor can win the state and get it to do things it likes, and sometimes management can do the reverse. And we kind of get through the early history of labor law, you see all that happening, right? So at first the courts are coming in and they will just straight up issue injunctions against strikes, claiming that they violate all sorts of things like interference with contractual relations, which is like a tort, or a violation of antitrust laws, things like that. So they're enjoining those things. Then the federal government comes in and passes the Norris LaGuardia Act and says that the federal courts, at least, are not allowed to enjoin strikes. And then a lot of states have their own little versions of that as well. That kind of persists for a while. Then you get the NLRA comes in, but then of course the NLRA is amended with Taft-Hartley, which waters it down. So, we're kind of going back and forth. So, what do you want to say the original purpose of the NLRA is? I mean, historically, it's an outgrowth of the national, what was it, the war board. There was like a war, like World War II, like NLRA, essentially, because they were trying to keep everything flowing for the war machine, and that kind of eventually becomes the NLRA, essentially. So, what I think overall, yeah, labor law has these sort of contradictory impulses. On the one hand, it wants to protect workers from certain employer actions. It also wants to make sure the state doesn't come in and prevent certain labor actions. But on the other hand, it's trying to keep labor relations stable enough to be productive. And so that could be preventing wildcat strikes or something like, specific rules for specific sectors. Like in the NLRA, the healthcare sector has a special rule about striking where you have to give advance notice and do certain things like that because they're worried about, like, if there's strikes at the hospital, like patients will die, So, it's a kind of give and take, but certainly at the moment, I would say it's not super great for workers. So,
yeah, I think that's the historian answer. It's nuanced and it's not super. It's not one way or another. I think is right, and also I think I would think that the earliest part of the NLRA was much more, it had much more of that pro-worker, pro-union impulse.
Pre-Taft-Hartley.
Pre-Taft-Hartley,
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the rule. I mean, like the unions can commit unfair labor practices as well, right? There's Section 8B. That wasn't even in the original NLRA. You couldn't. It was impossible for a union to commit a ULP in the original NLRA. So these things have changed over time.
Yeah. Okay. So the ACLU case that the ACLU is trying to make it easier for them to fire a worker for criticizing management. Can you give us the facts and the narrative of that case before we talk about what they're arguing right now?
Yeah, I mean, the short of it is that there's an employee, 8O, and Kate was criticizing management, not just by herself, but for other people. Had a number of grievances against a specific manager who the ACLU actually went on to investigate, and he ended up leaving the organization. I don't know, resigned, fired, always kind of hard to tell, but the investigation seemed to find merit actually in her complaints about how he was treating workers, which were not just her complaints, were other workers. And she posted some on social media criticizing certain things that the ACLU was asking them to do. Basic protected activity stuff, but also the kind of stuff that irritates management, especially if you're doing it publicly. Retaliation is something that you'll often see in those settings, and that's what she got. She got fired, and she is a lawyer and was represented by a union at the time, the Nonprofit Employees Union, and they brought unfair labor practice charges, just alleging basic retaliation for protected speech, protected activity, complaining about working conditions, and also filed for arbitration because the ACLU had an arbitration policy, not as part of a collective bargaining agreement, but just because they didn't even have a CBA yet. They were still, negotiating that. But separately, they had their own arbitration policy that restricted the ACLU from firing people without just cause. So she also brought a claim in arbitration saying that she had been fired without just cause. And the ACLU's main argument on all of this is that she was essentially fired for being racist. But we've now had two proceedings. The ALJ opinion's like 100 pages long. There's nothing that she said that's racist. She's Korean American, for what that's worth. Her boss was black, but she didn't say anything about him being black. She was talking about how he was treating workers, and he ended up getting fired anyways for that. But they kind of were doing that thing, which I guess we associate a little bit with wokeness overreach or whatever. In this case, I would say it's more of like cynical management stuff, taking advantage of like, progressive nonprofit, internal politics and whatever. But she won. The administrative law judge said that she had been fired in violation of the NLRA. The arbitrator said that she had been fired without just cause. And so she won both of those, and she's sitting just kind of like waiting for appeals and stuff. Like the ACLU could at any time just say, all right, we lost. We're going to reinstate you with back pay, which is what, they're required to do. But they can also appeal and do other kinds of things to waste time and delay all that further. And so one of the things that they chose to do in January was, as soon as we got that new NLRB, finally we got 3 members on the board. They have a quorum. They sent in a motion saying that they want to file a supplementary brief, and they need the board to give them permission to do that. They want to file a supplementary brief where they raise new arguments about what laws should apply, what the rules should be to determine when an employer can fire someone. So it can't just be, so under current law, and what was the law for a very long time, when you're engaging in protected speech and you're criticizing your employer, that's protected, but there are limits. If you say, hey, I don't like what you're paying me, and and then just say, you stupid N-word or something, to your boss,
Right.
That's going to lose protection of the act, as they say. Yeah, you talked about working conditions, but the way you did it was so opprobrious, as they say, that it goes over the line. And that was a very extreme test that they used for so long. My favorite case on this was a case called Pier 60, where a guy went on Facebook. This was like, I think he worked in like, he was like a waiter, but like at a resort hotel or something. Mm-hmm. And he was really mad at his boss, whose name was Bob. And he went onto Facebook and he just posted, "Bob is a nasty MFer. You don't know how to talk to anybody, blah, blah, blah." And he got fired, and the board reinstated him and said, that's not too far. You can say that if you want. And so that's a pretty extreme standard, like you have to be, mostly what they're worried about is if you're threatening people. Like, let's be honest, is if you're not just being mean about how you don't like your working conditions, but you're also kind of suggesting you're going to hit the guy, and she didn't do anything like that. So none of that was a problem for her. But during the first Trump administration, there was a case called General Motors where they had reversed that rule, that long-running rule, which was called Atlantic Steel. They had reversed it and basically said that as long as the employer, kind of has a general policy, this is a very simple paraphrase, but let's say the employer just generally doesn't tolerate like impolite speech. In that case, if the way you complain about working conditions is impolite, then they can fire you. Not because, and the theory here is they're not firing you because you're complaining about working conditions. They're firing you because you're being impolite. Mm-hmm. And so that would be, just to maybe sort of add on to that, that would be like a similar logic to the rule that says you can't do union solicitation in a break room if you are not allowed to do other solicitation in the break room. Am I remembering that correctly? Like if it is normal for a workplace to allow their workers to say like, oh, my church is having a fundraiser, would you be willing to donate to it? Or my daughter has Girl Scout cookies, or whatever, or something like that. If they're normally allowed to do that, then they can also do that with union stuff. But if they're never allowed to do any solicitation, then it's acceptable that they don't do union solicitation. Am I correct about that? About that being the law? And then if yes, is there kind of like a similar dynamic there in the reasoning? Yeah, that is correct. Now, you do have certain solicitation rights that cannot be banned by the employer on non-work time and non-work areas. But beyond that, the employer can ban all solicitation and that could include union solicitation. But they can't have a rule against solicitation that singles out union solicitation while allowing other kinds of non-work related solicitation. So a facially neutral rule, but it can't be discriminatory towards unions. And there is an analogy there that I see, right, is they're saying, well, we're just applying the same impoliteness rule to everything, not just to working condition speech. The way that they analogize it in General Motors is they actually analogize it to right line, which is the test that's applied to situations where, let's say, a worker does two different things. On the one hand, they engage in protected activity, they complain about working conditions. On the other hand, they were late for work, the next day, and the employer fires them. And under right line, the kind of key question is, if all they had done was be late for work, and you weren't also pissed at them for talking about working conditions, would you have still fired them? And if the employer can show that, yeah, we fire everyone who's late from work all the time, then they're going to be allowed to do that, and we're not going to assume that the reason they fired them is because they're talking about working conditions. They analogize it to that. The problem with that analogy is that right line is dealing with two actions, right? On the one hand, I did protected activity. On the other hand, I violated a rule. Whereas when we're talking about losing protection of a particular speech act, that's just one thing. So we're actually determining whether it is protected. We're not determining whether you had some other motive. And the question of what kinds of speech should be protected, is that the kind of thing that should be subject to an employer's policy, with some employers having very permissive policies because they let people say all sorts of things, or others or should it be an objective thing that's true across the board, across all workplaces? I, of course, think it's the latter. That had been the rule since the 70s, and it was disturbed during the first Trump administration. The Biden administration flipped it back to what it had been since the 70s, and the ACLU is basically saying, hey, why don't we go back to how it was for a few years under the first Trump administration.
Okay, I see. Thank you for laying out that I like. That's I don't know, that's super persuasive to me, but obviously it would be, right? I'm a union partisan. So you said on Twitter that you took issue with this. Obviously, you had a lot of words for the ACLU, and Richard Hanania took issue with your taking issue with the ACLU. You said that the ACLU is attempting to delete the speech rights of all private sector workers. And so Richard Hanania jumps in, and he says that everything about labor discourse uses upside-down logic. Here, limit the speech of workers doesn't mean they can't speak. It just means they need to follow the rules that are a condition of their employment. This is like saying allowing businesses to set work schedules is government restricting freedom of travel for employees. You responded to it on Twitter, but I'm interested in a further elaboration of it. How would you respond? What is your response to that argument?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to go at it. On Twitter, although I didn't say this explicitly, I just copy and pasted some text from the NLRA, the top of the NLRA, where they're talking about the purpose of the law, which never comes up because that's not but it's in there and it's fun to read. And then there's also the Norris LaGuardia Act that preceded the NLRA, which was passed in 1932, and it has like a little purpose and like policy statement in it. And I find those very fascinating because they are so at odds with the way that we think about freedom and capitalism, which is what he's getting at. He's got this very Mickey Mouse idea that, hey, we're all making voluntary choices and you've reached an agreement with your employer, so that was like a voluntary agreement, and then if you break it, of course they can fire you, and you can leave at any time, so it's all free association, free contract, all this kind of stuff, right? That's kind of this like philosophical way that we legitimize a system that when you look at it from the outside, you go, wow, it seems like actually there's people at the top and people at the bottom, and the people at the top really have a lot of power over people at the bottom. It seems like a lot of domination and exploitation going on. Instead of saying that, we go, it's actually everyone's just freely choosing this all the time. We're all just choosing to work, choosing that because we like our boss, whatever, right?
Right.
But that's kind of the foundational sort of myth of liberal capitalism, right? So I get why that's where he goes. But what I like about the NLRA and the Norris LaGuardia Act is whatever it lacks in its actual substance, which I don't think at present is all that helpful to workers. It has some very radical statements in it. So the Norris LaGuardia Act starts this way. He goes, whereas under prevailing economic conditions, developed with the aid of governmental authority for owners of property to organize in the corporate and other forms of ownership association, the individual unorganized worker is commonly helpless to exercise actual liberty of contract and to protect his freedom of labor and thereby to obtain acceptable terms and conditions of employment. So, they start with the idea that, hey, the government has created this capitalist system where we have owners and companies that kind of control and run everything. They control the capital. They control the means of production, in like a socialist sense. And for that reason, like a worker standing alone doesn't really have any power to like exercise actual freedom of contract and actual freedom of labor and speech or whatever. They're forced to subject themselves to one or another of these employing entities that kind of own everything and control everything. And so for that reason, like we need to be realistic about this and say that that is a place of power and control, and they're going to need legal protection of the state if we don't want the power that the owners were given by the state to trample over their rights. So I would say that's a very beautiful sentence and very weird because it sounds like something like a Marxist would write, but it's sitting there right in the U.S. Statutes. But that's the basic upshot. Like, do we want to talk about like liberal capitalist theory, or do we want to be like living in reality? And in a weird way, for the last 10 years or so, we realize now somewhat cynical, perhaps, sort of right-wing understandings of this, right? That was kind of the whole thing about cancel culture to an extent that they were critiquing was employers and educational institutions and public accommodations and all these things we interact with. Like, in order for us to be able to have individual freedom and be able to express what we think, good, bad, hateful, not hateful, whatever, however you want to view it, to have that freedom of individual expression, we need to be able to retain our employment, not get fired, not get kicked out of school, be able to go to the grocery store, be able to use card payment networks, be able to use banks, all that kind of stuff. And if those things start shutting down and our access to them gets shut down, if we say certain things, then we really don't have the right to say those things. And they were correct, like in the broadest way when they were saying those things. And now obviously things are on the other foot. But yeah, I think that's basically correct. I think anyone who has had a job in real life knows that at times you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to say that. I don't know if I want to get in the newspaper about how I'm supporting this or that candidate because I know my boss might not like it. And you're constantly having to navigate what level of political participation, public participation, what kinds of things you might say or coordinate with others, because you also need to maintain your professional status and your ability to retain employment.
Yeah, I do have to say I'm bummed that there are so many people that are not willing to kind of grapple with this. Really on either side, right? I mean, because we're a union radio program and we're concerned with just cause protections and, free speech in the workplace and stuff, we've always been kind of skeptical of the sort of like, oh, you say an improper thing on Twitter and so you're going to get fired. That's always kind of been, we're like, well, they should have a union contract and then they wouldn't, then they wouldn't be fired. Right. But on either side, it's frustrating that there's so few people kind of grappling with, well, what should actually the policy be, and so Hanania is kind of falling into this because I'm sure that I guess I wasn't following him super closely during peak woke, I guess you would say, from 2018 to 2022 or whenever it was, but I imagine that he had some of these anti-cancel culture takes, but he says that he recognizes, his response on Twitter is that I recognize there are ways that the market restricts freedom, but freedom in a I recognize freedom as in a libertarian sense as closer to the kind of freedom we should want than policies that abridge freedom of association. So he's like, okay, look, it seems to me the real world, I recognize what you're saying about the real world, but we should do policies to move us towards this more libertarian sort of freedom of contract sort of world than, what you're talking about, where the government is interfering in the freedom of contract. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, what does that mean? Like, what kind of steps would that entail? I mean, to me, when I think about it through my lens, I'm thinking, well, that would require quite a radical overhaul in a way that I don't think libertarians generally like. Like, in a weird way, this is an accommodation to capitalists, not maybe libertarian capitalism. It's an accommodation to capitalism to say, look, our kind of corporate system that we've set up with our laws, right, where we create corporate law and securities law and property law and contract law and bankruptcy law, that whole like installation, those like institutions that kind of create our thing, it does seem to crush individual freedom of kind of workers, people who don't own capital. But rather than kind of radically undo all that, what if we just kind of stick in some protections for them, to make sure that, the power doesn't go too far? That's like an accommodation to that. If you want to be like, well, I don't like those protections because that's like the state stepping in. Okay, well, let's take this logic and say, okay, well, the other path then to maintaining that freedom is to like fully unwind the whole corporate capitalist system. Like, that's what's going on in the Norris LaGuardia Act, that part that I just read, is they're like, well, we have this corporate capitalist system. It kind of is not good for the freedom of workers. Rather than unwind this corporate capitalist system, what if we stick in some protections for workers? And he's like, but when you stick in those protections for workers, that's state action. I don't really like that. And you're like, okay, well, so we're not doing that. Then what do we have to do? Like, it kind of, now you see where we have to go. And it's probably not a place that someone like him would want to go. But I mean, look, I think, especially when it comes to making sure people feel like they have real freedom, I think there's a lot of things you can do that aren't just labor regulation, right? So, because labor regulation often doesn't work anyways, like people still get fired illegally, and it can be hard to get them reinstated. And by the time you do, you've got moved on to another job, right? I'm not saying that's the best thing. Now, having a union president who can grieve it, and like we saw with GM, which I think you're going to go in like that can do a whole lot for you. But there's other things as well, like just protecting people from like economic collapse, like personal economic collapse can do a lot, right? High unemployment benefits can do a lot. Universal health care can do a lot. Like, imagine if you felt like, hey, if I get fired, worst case scenario is I can get unemployment benefits that will replace like 90% of my income, and I don't lose my health insurance anyways because it's public health insurance. That is Denmark. That's literally, I've just described what it is in Denmark to lose your job. In that situation, you're also going to feel a lot more freedom, unrelated to specific rules about how the employer can't do this and that. So I'm all for that as well. I'm not saying it's got to be a all or nothing, like labor regulation is your only tool, but you can't just pull it out and then expect things to go.
I think that's a great segue to, I mean, he's got like whole long essays. I mean, there was one of them about how the title is "Unions Are Not the Way to Help the Poor" or something, and it's like super. It's like thousands of words. I read most of it last night, and his primary gripe there, he's got all these moral arguments about how unions are evil and immoral and stuff because of, the government coercion. And I think we've kind of adequately addressed that to the extent that we can without him here to rebut it. And we did invite him on the program, but I'm not saying that he was like dodging. I mean, we're like a small Twitter account and we DM'd him. And so he probably just hasn't seen it. So, if he happens to see this, I would be interested in getting him on the show to rebut some of these. But so his primary gripe about it, or one of the primary gripes, is that unions and labor regulation are inefficient redistributive mechanisms, right? And so he's got an analogy here to try to demonstrate the absurdity of unions as a redistributive mechanism. He says, let's say a nation is concerned about poverty, so it passes a law that says the rich will have to give some of their money redistributed, will have to have some of their money redistributed to the poor. But instead of a progressive income tax used to fund cash payments to the unfortunate, the government decides that wealthy people who happened to be born in the spring will give their money to poor people whose birthdays are in the summer. Moreover, this redistribution does not go to anybody who is too poor. You have to already have a job to qualify, and a certain kind of job at that. In fact, you are going to make the poorest of the poor worse off through the policy. Finally, instead of cash payments that they can spend on whatever they actually need, the recipients of aid get gift cards to Bed Bath and Beyond. That is from Why Unions Are Immoral. And so, you can, if you're familiar with kind of the way that unions work, you can kind of recognize some of the parallels that he's trying to get at here. Unions primarily only we would argue they benefit everybody, but they primarily certainly benefit the people who are members of the unions and work in a firm. So they don't help as directly other people. There are all sorts of other stuff like seniority that he doesn't like, that he feels like are kind of restrictive on innovation and things like this. And so he says, look, let's grant that there is too much inequality. I don't think he would grant it, actually, but he's saying, look, if we did, let's just redistribute income directly, like you, so I'm interested in how you would respond to this, Bruenig, because you are constantly, one of your bailiwicks is like efficient distribution and tax systems and stuff, and lamenting inefficient redistribution. And so what do you make of the idea that let's just get rid of government protection for unions and labor regulation and go with direct income redistribution from the rich to the poor, and it's a direct transfer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big welfare state fan as well. So I think you can do both. At People's Policy Project, my think tank, we mostly write about welfare policy. These two things just do different things. Labor relations policy deals with labor relations, right? And the welfare state primarily functions as a way to get money and resources to people who currently are not working. They may have worked at some other time, but you think about our welfare state, it goes to the elderly, it goes to disabled people, it goes a lot to kids, right? Like education and food stamps, and that's mostly for kids. Even Medicaid and CHIPS, mostly for kids. Unemployment benefits, people who are unemployed. Paid leave, if you're in a state that has that, that's when you're not working, right? So we have a system for getting money to people who aren't currently working, which is the welfare state. That should be improved. And then but that still leaves the question of how are we going to organize production, and how are we going to organize labor and companies and all that stuff, like the productive aspect of our society. How is that supposed to be organized? And what people like Richard are doing without realizing it is they're just kind of taking their own favored system as if it's like the baseline. It's the normal system, and then you have to give some argument for why we have to deviate from the distribution that would result from his kind of system, where you set up the rules to be this sort of like laissez capitalist productive system. But those aren't the default rules, right? We have all kinds of rules, and we could argue that what he wants is actually to redistribute away from the distribution that would result from some other set of rules. So let me make this concrete. This is an example I've used many times before, but McDonald's is a good case study there. So in Denmark, I think people have seen, like, McDonald's workers make whatever, $25 an hour, something like that. In the U.S., they make whatever, $10, $15 an hour, $12. It might depend on where you were, but there's a huge difference between the amount of money that they make. And you can explain why that is by saying, well, look, in Denmark, there's something called the Restaurants and Hotel Employees Union. We have like Unite here. And it covers all the restaurant hotel employees in the whole country, including McDonald's workers. So they kind of just get paid on the same scale as all the other restaurant workers. Here, McDonald's workers, we don't have that kind of union organization. There's this weird franchising that occurs, all this kind of stuff that makes it to where they're paid different amounts in the different countries. Now, Hanania wants us to start from the US model and go, why change to the Danish model? That's not efficient. Why would you switch to that one? And then we're redistributing money to McDonald's workers, but aren't there poorer people than McDonald's workers, et cetera, et cetera. But why not instead we flip it and we go, let's just assume the Danish thing is the default. Why then would we switch to the American approach? Why would you take money away from McDonald's workers to give it to McDonald's shareholders or whoever else winds up with that money in the American system? So what we're doing when we're creating the rules that govern production, labor relations, corporate law, securities law, whatever, we are determining the distribution of income. We're not changing it. We're not redistributing it as if there is some default distribution of income that we then reform to modify. No, we are determining it in the first place. So to my mind, if I'm having to determine it in the first place, I would like something like you have in the Nordic countries where almost everyone is in a union, and as a result, labor gets a higher share of the revenue that comes into a firm, and also the distribution of wages among workers is compressed. So higher paid workers make sort of less than they do here, lower paid workers make more than they do here. I would take that, you put them out in front of me, I'm going to pick that option over this option. And that's got nothing to do with the welfare state. You also then need to do the welfare state. But what does taking $1 from a McDonald's shareholder, relative to the American context, and having it put in a McDonald's paycheck, how does that have any effect on our ability to do the welfare state? It doesn't. And in fact, in these countries where they have the most unionization and wages are the most compressed, they also have the biggest welfare states. These two things typically go together, in part because it's the unions that put in place the welfare states. Politically, that's the force behind those things.
And the final argument that he has that I wanted to get your thought on is the immorality of it. And so, he has this moral vision of the government coercion, but also, the fact that he feels like it undermines respect for entrepreneurs. So here's a quote from one of his essays about it. Organized labor targets the entrepreneurs and businesses who have done the most to alleviate the suffering of the poor, instead of season of birth-based redistribution, which we talked about in his analogy. It would be as if those who donated to charity were held uniquely responsible for any harms that befall those they give their money to. If you hand a poor person $1 and they buy a sandwich and choke on it, you're on the hook for their medical bills. Being pro-organized labor reflects an anti-capitalist attitude which leads to an inverted understanding of human progress and a demonization of the members of society we should feel most grateful towards, and specifically calls out Bezos as somebody who has done great things for society, and so
how grateful are you
therefore
feeling?
Yeah, so therefore not only should society at large feel grateful to him, but also Amazon workers specifically.
Sorry. Okay. I mean, I'm trying to even get my head around this. Like, on the one hand, it's kind of like a vibes point, right? Where he says, hey, the nature of organizing a union and sort of fighting for higher pay and that sort of thing, like, you can't help but say, well, who else is getting this money? And, they kind of become the villain. And, I keep slipping back into my sort of socialist thought and just thinking like, well, that's what you're identifying is that in our system, there's an inherent antagonism between capital and labor, right? This is like the most basic stuff ever, right? Because the company gets money in, they pay their suppliers, and then there's like a pot of money left. And some of that money will go to the owners and some of the money will go to the workers. And every dollar you give one or the other is a dollar that could have gone to one or the other, right? So that's an inherent part of our system, is that there's just an antagonism between allocating money to owners, allocating money to workers. if you want to like have that not be the case, again, you're talking about something very radical that would need to change to bring these things into public ownership, collective ownership, whatever, right? And then you extinguish that that inherent tension. But if you're going to set it up like this, like that's the tension that's going to be present. The other funny
well,
thing
and I
is, like,
think also
entrepreneur-
I'm interested in some more from you on this, but also I mean it really takes for granted it's just like saying taxation is theft. Takes for granted that the people who had the income to begin with had the right to it to begin with. It takes for granted that the ownership structure is right and moral, and that there shouldn't be a different percentage of ownership and control over the enterprise. It takes for granted that Bezos ought to be able to, almost single-handedly control a nearly $1 trillion enterprise, because he happened to be there kind of at the beginning of it. And so therefore, because of that, the people that contributed to it and made it what it is today, they don't get the control over it. They just, and it really takes that for granted without arguing for it, which I think is a frustrating thing.
Yes. No, there's question begging that goes into this in a number of levels. Another level is related to sort of who produced what value, which again is a very fundamental thing, right? So he's just assuming that the money that flows to an entrepreneur or an owner, that is an accurate assessment of how much value they created. But if you were to change the rules such that instead of Bezos having 100 billion, he only had 80 billion, that would necessarily mean that there was $20 billion of value that he actually generated that now, someone else has. But what is our like objective measure? How do we know that the amount of value he actually generated was 100 billion instead of 80? How do we know this? And you can't just tell me because he got it, right? Because that now it's circular. Because in a different set of rules and systems, he wouldn't have got it, right? So we need something outside of just pointing to the fact that he got it to explain why that is his value and not someone else's value. And that, again, goes to the key of the whole way we have these sorts of disputes, right? Is the workers are coming in and saying, well, wait a minute, I think maybe you were actually taking money in excess of what you produced. Like, sure, you did entrepreneurial labor. I'm not saying that doesn't take work. Of course it does. But there's millions of us who built the warehouses, who move all the packages, and I think we are maybe more responsible for more of the value than we have gotten. And maybe you've taken more of it than you actually contributed. And there's no like scientific way to settle that. It's a normative judgment.
Right. Exactly. Well, would love to have him on to rebut sometime, and so maybe that'll work out at some point in the future. But appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us. Is there anything else going on at the NLRB that you think that folks should know about? Any other cases that should be watched?
The big thing that's come out, kind of reassuringly, though maybe only for a little while, is it's pretty clear that they're not looking to overturn board law at the present. So, for at least the next 6 months, it seems like things are going to be stable. It takes longer than that to process a case anyway, so maybe that's not that helpful. But that was a big thing to look for, was are they going to come in immediately and start overturning precedent? Both the general counsel and the board has indicated that they do not intend to do that. So, that could be slightly good news for the time being.
You've got a new book out. Tell us about it.
That's right, the National Labor Relations book. So in addition, I run NLRB Edge, which is a newsletter that tracks the NLRB, NLRBedge.com, and then I also have a website, NLRBresearch.com, which contains all of the legal material that's at the board, all their decisions, all their memos, everything going all the way back to 1945. And it also has all the stuff on all the dockets. Anyways, because I have all that information, it's kind of occurred to me that I could use AI and large language models to produce outlines of board law. And those things exist. Lawyers produce them. They're called legal reference books. There's one called Developing Labor Law. Very expensive, though, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And with AI and LLMs, you could kind of do it in a more automatic fashion. And I used to be a programmer, and I mean, I guess I still am, but not, so like I kind of know how to do that stuff. So I used the LLMs to create a book that essentially gives you a rundown of the 100 most cited cases in NLRB history and how those cases have been applied. So we take the 100 most recent cases that cite to each of the 100 most cited cases, and we get 10,000 cases. And what results is a book that, surprisingly, I mean, as someone who does, like, it's pretty good. Like, it's a pretty good rundown of the most common stuff you're going to run into in board law, like retaliation and discrimination and information requests and unilateral changes and coercive rules and all this kind of stuff that comes up a lot. It's got a good rundown of it. And yeah, you can get it at nlrbresearch.com/book. It's $10. Is designed to be useful to union staff, rank and file, like the kind of people who deal with this stuff but aren't lawyers, don't have access to legal databases, but could like use something helpful, to kind of get the ball rolling on charges and even just spotting things that are illegal and stuff like that. So yeah, check it out.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I've enjoyed the conversation on Twitter about the use case for LLMs and AI, and I've been trying over the last couple of months to learn a little bit to try to find applications in my life where I can use it. I had a really big sort of revelation, I guess you could say, maybe about a year ago. I was driving a letter carrier and a NASA IT specialist to a union press conference, and the letter carrier, who's a steward, right, was going back and forth with the IT specialist the whole ride. It was like an hour and a half. We were going to Chattanooga, and the whole ride they spent talking about applications of ChatGPT and how it's helpful for him in doing grievances and stuff like this, and going back about the latest models and it's all and how it's allowed him to file a whole lot more grievances.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of interesting use cases. So.
A grievance robot. That's the way to go. Yeah, no, I mean, like any tool, used for good or bad, but we should use it for good.
There you go.
For as long as it exists.
Yeah. All right, Matt Bruenig, labor lawyer, proprietor of NLRB Edge. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. Always enjoy talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. As he said, although he said GM incorrectly, I think he meant Ford. But I didn't want to correct him. There's a guy who gave the president what for when he came to view his factory, and the UAW came out with an announcement at their national CAP conference, the Community Action Program conference, about his status. Let's play clip 3.
As most of you probably know, in January, Donald Trump visited the Ford Dearborn truck plant, Local 600. And as you all also probably know, there was a worker at that plant that day who famously told Mr. Trump exactly what he thought of him. Unfortunately, in that moment, we saw what the current president really thinks about working people in the way he responded. He gave us the middle finger. And he said some other vulgar words that I won't repeat here today. He said you twice. He also said, "You're fired." Well, this ain't The Apprentice.
Okay.
It took a lot of courage for that worker, TJ Sabula, to speak his mind to the most powerful person in the world. TJ, we got your back. Now, TJ is well aware that the UAW has his back and supported him in his beliefs. Freedom of speech is real. Now, I, as the vice president over the Ford department, can tell you TJ has got his job. And more importantly, TJ has no discipline on his record.
UAW,
That's right. That's right. And that's what we do best. We represent.
All right. That's, just so cool. And that's what having a union can do for you. You can call the President of the United States a pedophile protector on the job and keep your job with no discipline. Because guess what? He does his job and he does it well. But when there's somebody that he believes as a pedophile protector in his midst, he gets to say it. Oh man, that's so cool. So excited to see that announcement at their conference last week, and super excited for this brother. If you didn't believe that you needed a union before that, you're not getting away with that at a non-union plant, right?
That's right.
They'll fire you on the spot, and there won't be anything you can do about it. Because unfortunately, freedom of speech, the First Amendment, does not protect you from speech on the job, right? Perhaps, maybe you could argue if it was because of the, what you said to the president, maybe you could argue that the government was trying to pressure the company to fire you because of your speech, and so maybe there's something there. But I don't know how much. I don't know how far that would go, but this went all the way, and super happy for this brother, and everybody deserves a union because you deserve to be able to tell off the President of the United States and keep your job. So I don't know that I've got much else to say about that other than I'm super happy. So
yeah, it's great.
So we've got one more story that we wanted to talk about. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number if you want to call in before we wrap up. 844-899-8857. The Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, is laying off 30% of its staff now, and including there's one of the people that they laid off is a reporter in Ukraine in a war zone. That you would lay this guy off while he's, you don't bring him home to it's insane. It's crazy. And I also want to flag on this with the way the Washington Post is going. Jeff Bezos wrote an op-ed almost a year ago saying that they will no longer allow columns in their opinion pages that do not promote the free market and capitalism and the business case for stuff. They're not going to allow stuff in their opinion pages like that anymore. When Jeff Bezos first took over the Washington Post, people like us, I don't know that we probably mentioned it on the show specifically and that it was bad, but people like us, Bernie Sanders and a lot of other people said it's bad to have one of the world's richest men owning a historic media institution. Like, that's just is bad because there's so much conflicts of interest there. And Bernie was lambasted as a conspiracy theorist, as somebody who, just literally laughed out of the room. And the same people who lambasted Bernie as a conspiracy theorist for that are now writing op-eds about how the Washington Post is about how Bezos is destroying the Washington Post, and so it's worth kind of checking the record on that for who you get your information from in the future, right? Do you want to kind of be following for predictions and what's going to happen in the world, people who thought that Bernie Sanders was a conspiracy theorist because he could see the obvious trajectory that Bezos would take the Washington Post down? Is their analysis kind of worth taking into consideration? Okay, but they've cut their newsroom by 30%, including people who are in war zones. And it's concerning. These people are going to have a hard time. Contrary to popular belief, people, even who work at the Washington Post, just the normal rank and file people, not the big names, just the normies, they don't make big bucks. I don't even know that the median wage at the Washington Post, I don't even think is in the six figures. I think it's probably like $50,000, $60,000. The median wage at the Washington Post is probably somewhere around $70,000, $80,000. I'm just guessing based on what I know about kind of legacy institutions and their union contracts. But so these people, even though culturally they occupy maybe a higher status than some, they're not economically in a crazy wealthy position. These are real people who are doing real work, and they're being laid off because of, one of the richest people in the world want to destroy this institution. And so there's been some concerns about this. People have been, some of the reporters themselves have been talking about it on Twitter and how this has, hurt them, and, talking about their experience with this. And so there's this guy, Joel Berry. He is the editor of the Babylon Bee, a right-wing, like a right-wing onion. And he comes out with this such sanctimonious, self-righteous stuff after the Washington Post layoffs. He says, I live in the Midwest. I've seen entire factories, employers that kept a little cornfield town alive, disappear overnight after production was moved to Mexico or China. Complete devastation for an entire close-knit community. No tears. No 4,000-word eulogies in WAPO. No hyperventilating on Twitter. Anonymous suffering, broken families, people forced to uproot their lives just to survive. The overeducated, overpaid, overvalued, overprivileged activist disguised as journalist who spent years whipping up climate hysteria and fomenting racial division while destroying the reputation of a once great American newspaper have no idea what devastation looks like. Good luck with your Substack, Ashley. And so, just so much sanctimoniousness. I mean, it's just dripping with self-righteousness, this tweet here. And so I thought, well, we're a Union Talk radio program. We cover stuff like that all the time. We've been talking about the Tyson plant that is shutting down and going to destroy a small town in Lexington, Nebraska, going to kill 3,000 jobs. We've talked about Case New Holland in Iowa, going to kill hundreds of jobs, good-paying jobs, and those are just the most recent, right? You could talk about Goodyear in Alabama under the first Trump administration, moving production to Mexico. And so I just thought, and there's so many of these examples, right? And this guy, even though he's, the editor of the Babylon Bee, he comments on politics all the time. Like, that's what he does on his Twitter thing, is he talks about politics all the time. And so I wondered, has he, he's clearly very passionate about this. I don't know how else to describe this tweet other than a professed passion for the downtrodden, and particularly people who work in manufacturing jobs that are subject to the whims of these huge international corporations. And so I wondered if, given his prolific presence on Twitter, if he has commented on, you look at, he has tweeted 50,000 times. 50,000, that's a lot. That's a lot of times. He's talking about the Olympics, talking about how Priuses are bad, talking about how anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And this is just in the last day. And so, he's all the time on Twitter. He loves tweeting. And so I thought, I wonder if he has talked about the Tyson's plant in Nebraska. And so I go on his Twitter profile and I hit the search button. You can go up here and search his stuff. And I search for Tyson. And nothing comes up. No results for Joel W. Berry Tyson. And so I say, that's interesting. I wonder, maybe Lexington. So I search Joel W. Berry, Lexington, right? Because that's the town in Nebraska that Tyson is going to be decimating. Nothing. No results. And so then I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's just one thing. Maybe he's talked about Case New Holland in Iowa. No results for Case Joel W. Berry, Case New Holland. And so, I think it's a little rich to be going on this and he's a really, really big, Christian guy. And so, one of the things that I remember about reading the Bible, I grew up very religious, is the thing about, Jesus saying that the people who are, lengthening their phylacteries, or the people who are praying in public are getting their reward because they're doing the good thing where everybody can see it, right? He is talking about his concern for anonymous working class people without actually advocating for real working class people, that these situations that he is talking about in generalities are happening to specifically right now. And so, using this general dynamic to attack working people who do a different profession is just so freaking gross. And, I think is indicative of, sort of a poisoned mindset, I think. And it just makes me, it just feels really, really, I feel gross, like I need a shower reading it, knowing that he's using these people and these general dynamics as a weapon against other working class people. It's so, it would be gross even if he was, you shouldn't do it even if you had been advocating for, the people in Nebraska who are going to lose their jobs and have their town destroyed. But at least you would have a little bit of cover, right? At least if you had been saying, oh, Tyson's is destroying this town right now, we should do something about it. Why is Trump allowing this to happen? Why is Trump allowing this to happen under his watch? Why is he allowing 3,000 jobs to be moved from Lexington, Nebraska to Argentina? At least if you were doing that, there would be some level of cover. But he's not even doing that because I think he doesn't actually have this level of concern for people who work for entire factories that disappear overnight. I don't think that he actually has that much concern for the complete devastation of entire close-knit communities. I think he likes to use their stories to, to prosecute his grievances with people that he disagrees with politically. And it's just gross. And the Nebraska senator is not much better. So Pete Ricketts is one of the U.S. senators from Nebraska, and his opponent in the U.S. Senate race has argued that not only is this immoral, right? It's bad that Tyson's is doing this to so many thousands of people. It's going to be bad for these people, the 3,000 people. It's going to be bad for the town. It's also going to be bad for the United States. That one factory produced 5% of all beef in the United States. And so this is not going to bring down the price of beef. It's actually going to raise the price of beef, and it is going to lower the price that that cattle ranchers can sell their cattle for, right? Because this is going to decrease the number of buyers that there are for these cattle ranchers. So it's going to decrease the price that cattle ranchers can sell their cattle for. It's going to increase the price that consumers buy beef for. So it's really bad, and that is a violation. So Senate candidate Dan Osborne argues of the Packers and Stockyards Act, and because that act prohibits the sort of price manipulation. And so Pete Ricketts was asked about that, and here is what he had to say. Let's play clip 4.
Senator Ricketts, a couple months ago, you said that you were going to look into whether Tyson was violating the Packers and Stockyards Act, but now 3,300 people have lost their jobs. So I'm wondering what exactly you did to try to save that plant.
So they are not violating the Stockyard and Packyards, right? But I've been to Lexington to work with the mayor about being able to use that facility, continue to create jobs. So we're going to be working with Tyson. They're talking about, they're doing an evaluation of what they're going to continue for, but there's valuable resources there with regard to the land, the railroad spur, and the wastewater plant that can be used for future jobs.
But what did you do to try to save it before it closed down?
So again, this is one of the things where we have a private sector.
The door couldn't close soon enough. I mean, just so gross here. And so Dan Osborne, you know, like I said, his Pete Ricketts' opponent for the U.S. Senate in Nebraska, he was on the Majority Report last week talking about this. And so we've got a clip from his appearance on the Majority Report. Let's play clip 5 where he reacts to this.
We have the Packard and Stockyards Act of 1921, which is what, you know, I've tried to hold Tyson's feet to the fire on, as far as, you know, what that law says is if you close a plant, then you should have that plant available to sell to a competitor. And they are not doing that. They are going to mothball this plant. So they are trying to manipulate the market and the prices. So what that means, if you do a little bit of a micro dive into it, that means the producers or the ranchers who are actually finally making decent money for the product that they raise, they're going to make it so they're not going to make as much money. And then the consumers, which is us, when we go to the grocery store, which we're all experiencing, I haven't bought beef in probably 6 months. Like I just walk right on by it because I just can't afford it anymore. So that's what's happening. And Tyson knows this, and they are continuing to enrich themselves because corporations, they have one goal in mind, right? And that's profit. And that's to get their CEOs and their board, enrich them as well as enrich their stockholders. That's their main reason for existence, I suppose. So I am for the workers. I have unapologetically have a workers platform, pro-worker platform. I want to be for these people. And what's happening, you mentioned 3,200 jobs in Lexington. It's not just the 3,200 people that are affected. It's the entire town. I mean, you figure all the grocery stores, the gas stations, the car dealers, all these people are going to suffer. In fact, $1 billion per year is going to be taken out of Nebraska. So that's huge. So I went there and I did a press conference to highlight this issue, especially, the antitrust issue that they're violating. And then so what that prompted Pete Ricketts, my opponent, to come on and say, hey, I'm going to look into this, guys, right? Like, yeah, I'm going to look into it. The day after he announced he was going to look into it, he got a donation from Tyson. And now he's totaled $72,000 from Tyson. And now, after looking into it, he's found that Tyson is not in violation of any law, which is complete BS.
So there you go. I mean, so gross. And then following this news, Trump signed an executive order to allow more beef imports from Argentina. It is going to quadruple the amount of beef imports from Argentina. This is going to help his right-wing buddy, Milei, in Argentina. It's going to boost their economy while destroying the economy of this small... I mean, literally, it's insane. And it's not going to decrease beef prices, increasing the amount of imports, because for the last 3 years, the U.S. has had record levels of beef imports. I'm reading from Lori Wallach's Twitter page. She is a international trade expert, And so she's talking about how the last 3 years, the U.S. has had record levels of beef imports, and it has not reduced consumer prices. But what it has done, and what this will do, quadrupling beef imports from Argentina will do, is it will hurt ranchers who packers have been squeezing. It is not going to change the meatpacking monopolists' power to rig high consumer prices, but it will hurt the ranchers who packers have been squeezing. It's going to make it more difficult for them to sell. It's going to put downward pressure on their ability to sell cattle to these folks. And it's not going to be, I mean, it is so crazy seeing this play out in real time as the people who are in power got into power by positioning themselves as champions of the working class and these types of people specifically. Insane. But I think that's going to be it for us today. We appreciate everybody tuning in.
I do want to...
Free American said Champion Paper closed a plant in Lawrence County years ago, tore the entire plant down to the ground. Trump's America First sure involves a lot of money and favors overseas, says Benjo. Yeah, it's bad. It is not good.
Well, let's leave you with some good news, which is that there are some really good workshops that Labor Notes is offering over the next couple months that I wanted to lift up. They do have the Stewards Workshop in February and March. February is going to be Thinking Like an Organizer. The March Stewards Workshop is Investigating Grievances. So those sound really helpful. They will be kicking off another round of the Secrets of a Successful Organizer series on March 4th. So that's really, really exciting. If you've never been through it, it's worth doing. If you know people who've never been through it, send this to them. Go to labornotes.org/events. They will have another What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart workshop, which is always helpful. And here's one I'm really excited about on February 23rd, Running for Union Office. That is one of the most important things that you can do to try to transform this labor movement, have a more vibrant working class movement. And I would just urge people to consider taking that class. Consider, can you run for union office? Can you step up in some kind of new role? There's a lot of good folks holding down union offices across the country. But there's a lot of folks who've been kind of sitting in those seats for a long time, and maybe it's time to shake things up. So, again, that's February 23rd. It's going to be 7 p.m. Central, running for union office. Those internal elections are one of the ways that you can really drive the work forward. And, like any elected office, there has to be accountability. There has to be oversight. There has to be real responsiveness to the folks who are being represented. So again, go to labornotes.org/events, check those out, share those around with folks. As you know, the big Labor Notes conference will be in June in Chicago. Hope to see a lot of y'all there.
All right, that's going to be it for us. We'll see y'all next week.